Australia has become a kind of outlier and become one of the cruelest nations on earth in an area where we used to be a global leader. One of the real dangers of the debate we're seeing, not just in Australia but globally, has been the dehumanisation of migrants and the dehumanisation, particularly of refugees. And you see that in the metaphors that are used to describe when people, we talk about waves and floods and hordes and these things. The language that's used officially in this country, we don't have asylum seekers arriving in this country anymore, we have illegals. We don't have an immigration department, we have a border protection force. Like, those changes in language really change people's understanding of what's happening. The politics poisons the policy in this area. This sort of cheap sloganeering, stop the boats, this sort of stuff, which doesn't go anywhere near to explaining just how complicated this issue is. And I think that Australia's been really poorly served by that political debate, and we've ended up with the situation we do on Nauru and Manus, with the situation where people are intercepted at sea and forced back without any real assessment of whether we are legally obliged to protect them. There are other countries who turn boats back at sea. There are other countries who engineer offshore processing. The United States does it. But Australia's deliberately secretive efforts to push these people away, to dehumanise them, to remove them from sight, and to hold them in absolutely abysmal conditions, very dangerous conditions, that doctors, that caseworkers, that the United Nations, that Amnesty, that anybody who goes there says is damaging, deliberately punitive and dangerous, is an extreme measure for any country to take, but particularly a liberal democracy like Australia. The dehumanisation extends to people's names. People, if you're in offshore detention, you have a 6-character boat ID, GUH 123. And I remember, reading reports of officials visiting Nauru and asking children their names, and they respond with a 6-character boat ID. I mean, the level of dehumanisation that goes on in the policy is just quite extraordinary. The Nauru Files was a really powerful piece of work, I think, because this wasn't advocates talking, or this wasn't the Guardian speaking, this wasn't refugees making their case. This was the regime itself talking, and we never heard from the machinery, and it's an extraordinarily large machinery to go and sort of run these operations. They're very, very expensive. They involve a lot of people, a lot of bureaucracy. So all of a sudden we had thousands and thousands of documents detailing the way this regime worked, the way it talked to itself, and the recognition within the regime of all the damage that was being done. I think that's what made the Nauru Files so powerful, is that there was no agenda here. This was the kind of machine stripped bare and revealing itself to be just how cruel it was. The response from the Nauru Files was quite extraordinary. Sort of all over the world, people finally realised what this place was like inside, but particularly and this remains the case around the concern around children, that children who were born in that circumstance or taken to that circumstance through no volition of their own, at a stage in their life developmentally that was so crucial to them. They were in this place that was so damaging. They were seeing their parents lose hope and attempt suicide. They were seeing their classmates, attempt suicide. They were seeing, no authority in life beyond the Serco guard carrying the keys. There was immense concern for the children in that place. The Nauru Files revealed a lot of what we'd heard, and that was, the sexual assault of young children, the physical assault of young children, the deleterious impact of detention on children, suicide attempts by children, self-harm attempts, and we've seen that continue, even post the Nauru Files. In the last few months there have been 3 children on Nauru who, suffering acute mental illnesses as young as 10 years old, have made repeated suicide attempts. The Australian government has said that they're safe and being well cared for on Nauru. The federal court has disagreed and ordered them to be brought to Australia for care. But by the time you've reached a 10-year-old who's attempted suicide 3 times, you're almost acting too late. I mean, these children are already incredibly damaged by what they've endured over, for some of them, most of their lives, and they remember little of a life outside of those processing centres.